I never thought I'd watch the sunrise through prison bars for failing to pay child support on a kid who wasn't mine. But that's what happens when your picture-perfect wife has been living a double life. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Late nights at the office, mysterious text messages, and a daughter whose eyes didn't quite match mine. By the time I discovered the truth, I'd already lost my career, my freedom, and nearly my sanity. This is how one DNA test changed everything. My name is Mason Clark. I'm 46 years old, and for 15 years, I built a comfortable life as a pharmacist at Value RX, one of those big chain drugstores you see on every corner in suburban America. I was the guy who knew everyone's prescriptions, who'd slip a lollipop to the kids when they came in with their moms, who'd take time to explain to elderly customers exactly how their medications worked. People trusted me. I had respect in the community. Natalie and I had been together for nearly 8 years, married for 5. We had a 4-year-old daughter, Emma, who had my eyes, or so I thought. We lived in a modest but nice 4-bedroom in a good school district in Springfield. 2 cars in the garage, a golden retriever named Buddy, weekend barbecues in the summer. The whole American dream package, right there in our perfectly landscaped yard. The day everything imploded started like any other Tuesday. I'd worked the early shift, was home by 3, planning to take Emma to the park before dinner. When I walked in, Natalie was sitting at her kitchen island, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, face expressionless. "We need to talk," she said, not even looking up. Those 4 words, they're never the beginning of anything good. I put my keys down. "What's going on?" "I want a divorce." Just like that. No warning. No, let's work on things. No counseling suggestion. Just the nuclear option, dropped into our kitchen like a grenade. "What?" "Natalie, where is this coming from?" My mind was racing, trying to connect dots that weren't there. "If this is about the hours I've been working." "It's not about your hours, Mason. It's about us. We're done. I've already talked to a lawyer." The shock hit me like a physical blow. Already talked to a lawyer? This wasn't a spontaneous decision. She'd been planning this, behind my back, for who knows how long. "What about Emma?" My voice caught on our daughter's name. Something hardened in Natalie's expression. "I want full custody. You can see her every other weekend." Every other weekend? I saw my daughter every day. I gave her breakfast each morning, read her bedtime stories most nights. And now Natalie wanted to reduce me to an every other weekend dad? "That's not happening," I said, finally finding my spine. "Emma needs both of us." Natalie's laugh was cold, unfamiliar. "You'll find the courts typically side with mothers." "Oh, and I'll need substantial child support, of course." "Child support?" I was already covering our mortgage, both car payments, Emma's preschool tuition, and most of our other expenses. But something in Natalie's calculating gaze told me this wasn't about Emma's needs. This was about punishing me, though for what, I couldn't yet understand. "Why are you doing this?" I finally asked. She stood up, smoothing her perfectly pressed slacks. "People change, Mason. I've outgrown this life." She gestured vaguely around our kitchen, the kitchen I'd renovated myself last summer while she was at a work retreat. As she walked out, I noticed the suitcases by the door. She'd already packed. She was ready to walk out of our life together like it meant nothing. "Emma and I will be at my sister's," she said, not looking back. "My lawyer will contact yours." The door closed behind her with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than a slam. The weeks after Natalie left were a blur of lawyer meetings and sleepless nights. My attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia, didn't sugarcoat things. "Courts in this state typically favor the mother," she said, shuffling through my paperwork. "But we'll fight for joint custody." I couldn't stomach the thought of seeing Emma, only 4 days a month. She was my world, the little girl who insisted I check under her bed for monsters, who knew exactly how I organized the pill bottles at work, who called me her superhero daddy. When we finally had our first custody hearing, Natalie showed up in an outfit that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her lawyer, a slick guy in an expensive suit, painted me as a workaholic who was rarely home, conveniently omitting that I worked extra shifts to pay for the lifestyle Natalie insisted we maintain. The judge awarded temporary joint custody, but with the schedule heavily weighted in Natalie's favor. I got Emma every other weekend and Wednesday evenings, 7 days a month with my own daughter. The first drop-off was excruciating. Natalie pulled up to my apartment complex in her new BMW. Apparently, She'd already upgraded from our practical family sedan. Emma bounced out, running to hug me, her little backpack bobbing. "Daddy, I missed you so much." She squeezed my neck so tight I could barely breathe, but I wouldn't have loosened her grip for anything. Natalie stood by her car, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She needs to be back by 7 p.m. Sunday. Not 7:05, not 7:10. 7. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak civilly. And no sugar after 6 p.m. And make sure she practices her reading. And I know how to take care of our daughter, Natalie. My voice came out steadier than I felt. She pursed her lips, then turned to Emma. "Be good for Daddy, sweetie. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all." After she drove off, I carried Emma and her overnight bag up to my new place. A one-bedroom apartment with a pull-out sofa in the living room that would be Emma's bed during visits. It was all I could afford after Natalie's lawyer secured temporary support payments that took nearly half my income. Emma looked around the sparse space, her little forehead wrinkling. "Daddy, where's all our stuff?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "This is Daddy's new home, Pumpkin. We'll make it super cozy. Okay." She nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we make a pillow for it?" For the first time in weeks, I smiled genuinely. The biggest one ever. Trying to maintain my career while being there for Emma was like walking a tightrope during a hurricane. I negotiated my work schedule of Value RX to free up my custody weekends, which meant pulling double shifts on weekdays. The district manager wasn't thrilled, but 15 years of loyal service counted for something. "Clark, your numbers are slipping," Dave mentioned during my quarterly review. "Customers are asking for you specifically, and you're not here half the time they come in." "I'm dealing with a divorce," I explained, hating how the word tasted. "I've got my daughter on specific days, and I can't miss them." Dave nodded sympathetically, but his eyes told a different story. Corporate didn't care about personal problems. They cared about metrics and customer satisfaction scores. "Just get those refill times back down, all right? And maybe consider coming in for a few hours on your daddy weekends." I wanted to tell him where he could shove his suggestion, but instead forced a smile. "I'll figure something out." Meanwhile, Natalie's demands escalated. The temporary child support wasn't enough, apparently. She filed for permanent arrangements that would take nearly 60% of my income. When I called to confront her, she scoffed. "Emma deserves the same lifestyle in both homes. Not my fault your apartment is a dump." "It's a dump because you're bleeding me dry," I snapped. "I'm already paying the mortgage on the house you're living in." "The house that's in both our names," she corrected. "Besides, you should be grateful I'm not asking for alimony." Each month was a financial high-wire act. I started skipping lunches, canceled my gym membership, and sold my golf clubs. Not that I had time for golf anymore. Even with these sacrifices, I was barely keeping afloat. The one bright spot was Emma. During our weekends together, I poured every ounce of energy into making memories. We built pillow forts, visited the duck pond, baked cookies shaped like dinosaurs. Her laughter was the only thing keeping me sane. But the exhaustion was catching up. One Monday morning, after staying up late finishing monthly inventory reports, I mixed up two similar-looking prescriptions. The pharmacist technician caught my mistake before it went out, but Dave called me into his office immediately. "This is serious, Mason. One mistake like this that gets to a patient could end your career and someone's life." "It won't happen again," I promised, though my bloodshot eyes undermined my conviction. "It better not. Consider this your first and only warning." As I walked back to my station, I checked my phone. Another text from Natalie. "Emma's summer camp deposit is due. $1,200. I've already paid my half." I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes briefly. Something had to give, and I was terrified it would be me. The inevitable happened on a Tuesday in March, 9 months after Natalie walked out. I'd been working 60-hour weeks, surviving on energy drinks and sheer determination. The mistake was small, dispensing 30 pills instead of 90, but it was my third error that month. Dave didn't even pretend to be sympathetic this time. "This isn't working, Mason. Value RX can't afford the liability." Just like that, 15 years of loyalty ended with a cardboard box of personal items and final paycheck. On the drive home, panic clawed at my chest. How would I pay child support? The mortgage? My rent? I spent the next week applying to every pharmacy within 50 miles. The responses were identical. "We'll keep your resume on file." Translation: not interested in a pharmacist with recent dispensing errors. By the time my next weekend with Emma rolled around, I was surviving on unemployment benefits that barely covered my rent. I considered canceling. How could I afford to feed her, much less do anything fun? But the thought of missing those precious days was unbearable. Emma didn't seem to notice we were eating mac and cheese instead of ordering pizza, or that our Saturday adventure was a free community event rather than the children's museum. She was just happy to be with me, showing me her new wobbly tooth and practicing the songs from her preschool spring concert. Then Natalie called Sunday afternoon, her voice razor sharp. "Where's this month's support payment?" "I lost my job," I admitted. "I'll get another one soon, but not my problem. The payment was due yesterday. Can you give me a couple weeks? I've got interviews lined up," and she cut me off. "Our agreement doesn't have a when it's convenient clause, Mason. Figure it out." I sold my watch, pawned my laptop, applied for food stamps. Each week, I sent Natalie whatever I could scrape together. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. It wasn't enough. The threatening letters from her lawyer started arriving, followed by notices from the court. 3 months after losing my job, I received the final blow, a court summons for failure to pay child support. My attorney called with the bad news. "They're pushing for penalties, Mason. Possibly even jail time if you can't pay the arrears." Jail time. I sank onto my sofa, the room spinning around me. "For trying to support my daughter while looking for work. The system doesn't care about intent," she said gently. "Just results." "Clark, Mason J." The bailiff's voice echoed through the courtroom as I stood, legs barely supporting me. Judge Harding hardly looked up from her paperwork. "Mr. Clark, you're currently behind $12,450 in child support payments. How do you plead?" "Your Honor, I lost my job, but I've been—" That wasn't the question. Guilty or not guilty? My court-appointed attorney nudged me. "Guilty, Your Honor, but with mitigating circumstances." The judge finally looked at me, eyes cold as January ice. "The court acknowledges your plea. You're sentenced to 4 months in county detention for willful failure to pay child support. Perhaps this will motivate you to meet your obligations to your child." Just like that, I became an inmate. They took my belt, my shoelaces, my dignity. 4 months in jail because I couldn't find work fast enough after being fired. 4 months away from Emma. 4 months that might as well have been 40 years. The irony wasn't lost on me. My ex-wife had me jailed for child support, which meant I'd now have an even harder time finding employment to pay that support. The system wasn't designed for justice, just punishment. County lockup was a special kind of hell. I bunked with a check fraudster named Darnell who snored like a chainsaw, ate bland food that barely qualified as edible, and showered with one eye open. I kept to myself, avoided eye contact, and counted days like precious gems. The worst part? Emma thought I'd abandoned her. Natalie told her I was away on a trip and couldn't see her. No visits, no calls. My parents tried to maintain contact, bringing her to see me once, but Natalie shut that down quickly with legal threats. 3 weeks into my sentence, a guard called me to the visitation area. I assumed it was my parents, but instead found an unfamiliar face waiting. "Mason Clark? I'm Eric Donovan." The name sounded vaguely familiar. "Do I know you?" "We met a few times at company parties. I worked with Natalie at Summit Real Estate for a while." Now I remembered, tall guy, sales team, always hanging around the punch bowl at Christmas parties. "What brings you here?" "Natalie sent you to rub salt in the wound." Eric shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, she has no idea I'm here. Can we talk privately?" The guard moved a few feet away, still watching but out of earshot. "I've been struggling with something," Eric said, lowering his voice. "Something I should have told you years ago." My stomach tightened. About what? About Natalie. And maybe about Emma. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the room too small. What about Emma? Eric took a deep breath. Natalie was having an affair. For years. Since before Emma was born. The words hit me like physical blows. An affair? Before Emma was born? With who? I demanded, though part of me already knew. With Jeff Townsend. Her boss. Jeff. The man who'd given Natalie her big promotion 2 years ago. The man who'd always insisted on hugging her a beat too long at office functions. The man who'd recently divorced his own wife and moved Natalie into his lakefront property. Why are you telling me this now? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Eric looked genuinely remorseful. Because you're sitting in jail for a kid that might not even be yours. And that's not right, man. It's just not right. Eric's visit left me reeling. After he left, I returned to my cell and sat motionless on my bunk for hours, mind racing through every moment of my relationship with Natalie, searching for clues I'd missed. The timeline fit. Natalie and I had been going through a rough patch around the time Emma was conceived. She'd been working late constantly, claiming a big listing was taking all her energy. I believed her, supported her, picked up the slack at home, all while she was with Jeff. The next morning, I requested paper and a pen from a sympathetic guard and wrote to my parents. I couldn't bring myself to explain everything in a letter that might be read by prison staff, so I simply asked them to contact my attorney immediately about a new development. 2 days later, my attorney visited, bringing the paperwork for a court-ordered paternity test. It's a long shot, she warned. Even if the test proves you're not the biological father, the court might still hold you responsible for support since you've acted as her father for years. I need to know. I insisted, signing the forms with shaking hands. The waiting was excruciating. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The question consumed me. Was Emma, the child I'd loved completely for 4 years, actually mine? I struggled with conflicting emotions. If Emma wasn't biologically mine, would that change how I felt about her? The answer came immediately. No. I would always love her. But would I still be obligated to pay child support to Natalie? Would I still have legal rights to see Emma? The uncertainty was torture. Meanwhile, jail life continued its grinding monotony. I joined a work detail, cleaning the facility, anything to keep busy and earn the minimal good behavior credits that might shorten my sentence. 3 weeks after Eric's visit, I received another visitor, my attorney, clutching a manila envelope. The results came back, she said, her professional mask slipping enough to reveal a glimmer of sympathy. I stared at the envelope, suddenly terrified of its contents. Tell me, the DNA test shows a 0% probability that you're Emma's biological father. The world tilted sideways. Although I'd suspected this might be the result, having it confirmed knocked the air from my lungs. For 4 years, I'd been raising another man's child, believing she was mine. Natalie had lied to me, to the courts, to everyone, even possibly to Emma herself. What happens now? I finally managed. My attorney's eyes lit up with something I hadn't seen in months. Hope. Now we fight back. This changes everything, Mason. We can file for immediate release, sue for fraud, reclaim all the support you've paid. Most importantly, we can clear your record. For the first time since being locked up, I felt a spark of something beyond despair. Natalie had taken so much from me. My home, my financial stability, my freedom, and precious time with the little girl I'd raised as my daughter. But now, finally, the truth was coming to light. Do it, I said. File everything. It's time Natalie faced some consequences of her own. The judge who freed me wasn't Judge Harding. This one, Judge Morales, actually looked at me when he spoke, his eyes reflecting something like outrage as he reviewed my case. In light of the DNA evidence and clear evidence of fraud, he announced, this court orders the immediate release of Mason Clark and the expungement of all charges related to failure to pay child support. Just like that, after 2 months behind bars, I was free. My attorney met me outside the detention center, already outlining our next steps. We're filing fraud charges against Natalie tomorrow. We'll also petition for recovery of all child support payments, plus damages for lost wages, emotional distress, and legal fees. I stepped into the May sunshine, feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier, free from jail, but weighed down by a new reality. The basic truth I'd built my life on for 4 years, that I was Emma's father, had been a lie. My parents picked me up, hugging me tightly, their faces showing the strain of the past months. Mom kept wiping tears, while Dad's jaw remained clenched and barely contained fury. I've set up the spare room, Mom said as we drove to their house. Stay as long as you need. We're behind you 100%, Dad added. What that woman did was criminal. I settled into their guest room, staring at the ceiling fan that had been there since my childhood. How had my life collapsed so completely? 9 months ago, I'd had a career, a family, a home. Now, I was a middle-aged man living with his parents, unemployed, with a criminal record, even if soon to be expunged, and grieving a child who had never truly been mine. The question that kept me awake: what about Emma? She didn't know I wasn't her biological father. She didn't understand why I disappeared from her life. In her 4-year-old mind, I was still Daddy, the man who checked for monsters under the bed, who knew exactly how she liked her peanut butter sandwiches cut, who could identify every dinosaur in her picture books. Biology or not, I loved that little girl. But did I have any right to remain in her life? Would fighting for visitation just confuse her further? My attorney called with unsettling news the next morning. Natalie's fighting the fraud charges. Claims she genuinely believed you were Emma's father until the DNA test. That's bull, I snapped. She knows exactly who she was sleeping with. I agree, but proving it requires evidence. We need to build a solid timeline of her affair with Townsend. That's when I remembered Eric. I might have a witness. A former co-worker of Natalie's who knew about the affair. She jumped on this. Call him immediately. If he'll testify, we've got her. Eric agreed to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop near my parents' house. He looked nervous, constantly checking the door like Natalie might burst in. I should have spoken up years ago, he admitted. But Natalie made it clear that anyone who crossed her would regret it. She's ruthless at work. You must know that. I need you to testify. Eric, tell the court what you know. He hesitated, then straightened his shoulders. I'll do it. It's time someone stood up to her. For the first time in months, I felt something like hope. Natalie had manipulated the system, manipulated me, even manipulated Emma. But her house of cards was about to collapse. The legal process moved at an excruciating pace. Depositions, motions, countermotions, each designed to delay the inevitable reckoning. Natalie hired an expensive attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces, as if that euphemism somehow erased her fraud. Meanwhile, I stayed with my parents, applied for pharmacy positions in neighboring counties, and tried to rebuild some semblance of a life. The hardest part was not seeing Emma. Natalie had cut off all contact, claiming it would confuse Emma to see me while our legal battle continued. My attorney fought for temporary visitation rights, arguing that abruptly removing me from Emma's life was harmful to her emotional well-being. The family court, at least, seemed to recognize this truth, granting me one supervised visit every 2 weeks. Our first reunion was at a sterile visitation center, with a social worker observing from the corner. Emma ran to me, flinging her small arms around my neck. Daddy, you're back from your trip. It was so long. I held her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, fighting back tears. I missed you so much, Pumpkin. Mommy said you were helping sick people far away. Did you make them better? The innocent question from the little girl who still believed I was her father nearly broke me. I tried my best, was all I could manage. For 2 precious hours, we played with blocks, read books, and she told me about preschool and her new ballet class. When our time ended, I promised I'd see her again soon, though I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. As the fraud case progressed, Eric proved invaluable. He provided emails, dates of suspicious outings, even photographs from company events showing Natalie and Jeff's body language that crossed professional boundaries. The turning point came when my attorney subpoenaed Natalie's phone record from the period around Emma's conception. The frequency of calls and texts between her and Jeff told their own damning story. During her deposition, Natalie maintained her innocence with Oscar-worthy conviction. I had no reason to believe Mason wasn't Emma's father. Yes, Jeff and I had a professional relationship, but it never crossed boundaries until after my separation. Eric's testimony shattered that narrative. He described walking into Jeff's office after hours, finding Natalie in a compromising position, nearly 2 years before our divorce. When confronted with the phone records showing dozens of late-night calls during the time Emma was conceived, Natalie's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. So what if Jeff is Emma's father? Mason loved her. He should be grateful I let him raise her. The attorney's stenographer captured every word of this outburst. In that moment, Natalie had inadvertently confessed to knowing the truth all along. Outside the deposition room, my attorney couldn't hide her satisfaction. We've got her. Fraud, perjury, contempt of court. She'll be lucky if she doesn't face criminal charges. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt hollow. What happens to Emma in all this? She's the innocent one. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when I arrived for the final hearing. My case had attracted media attention. Pharmacist jailed for child support. DNA proves he's not the father. Made for attention-grabbing headlines. I kept my head down, following my attorney through the gauntlet of microphones and cameras. Inside, Natalie sat with her attorney, her perfect posture and designer suit, creating an image of respectability that I now recognized as entirely false. Jeff Townsend, Emma's biological father, was conspicuously absent. Judge Morales entered, and the courtroom fell silent. He didn't waste time on preliminaries. Having reviewed all evidence in this matter, the court finds clear and convincing proof of fraud perpetrated by Natalie Clark. She knowingly misrepresented Mason Clark as the father of Emma Townsend, resulting in significant financial and personal damages. I watched Natalie's face as her carefully constructed world collapsed. Her expression cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally, fear. The court orders immediate termination of all child support obligations. Additionally, Ms. Clark is ordered to repay all child support collected, totaling $46,245, plus $75,000 in damages for lost wages, legal fees, and emotional distress. The judge paused, his gaze hardening as he addressed Natalie directly. Furthermore, this court is referring this case to the district attorney for potential criminal prosecution on charges of perjury and fraud. Ms. Clark, your actions were not merely deceptive, they were criminal. My attorney squeezed my arm in triumph, but I felt oddly detached. Financial restitution couldn't restore the months I'd lost behind bars, couldn't repair my damaged career, couldn't heal the psychological wounds of this betrayal. As we exited the courtroom, Natalie tried to approach me, her mask of confidence finally shattered. Mason, please, you have to understand. I thought I was doing what was best for Emma. I stopped, facing her directly for the first time in months. No, Natalie, you did what was best for yourself. You always have. What about Emma? She asked, desperation creeping into her voice. She loves you. She asks about you every day. The mention of Emma pierced my detachment. That's the only thing we need to discuss. I want continued visitation rights. Her eyes widened. After everything, you still want to see her? Even knowing she's not yours. Biology doesn't make a father, I said, surprised by my own certainty. Love does. I've been Emma's dad since the day she was born, and if she still wants me in her life, I'll be there. Natalie's lawyer pulled her away before she could respond, but I'd made my position clear. DNA test or not, I wasn't abandoning Emma. Outside, the spring sunshine felt cleansing. My parents waited by their car, their faces showing relief and vindication. My mother hugged me tightly. It's finally over, she whispered. You can move forward now. But was it really over? The legal battle might be resolved, but the emotional aftermath was just beginning. How would I explain to Emma, when she was old enough to understand, why I disappeared from her life, then reappeared? How would I build a relationship with her while navigating the complicated dynamics with Natalie? These questions had no simple answers, but for the first time in nearly a year, I had the freedom to face them on my own terms. The judge's ruling hadn't just restored my financial standing. It had given me back my agency, my dignity. As I drove away from the courthouse, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I could be part of Emma's life without Natalie's manipulation. It wouldn't be the future I'd once envisioned, but it could still be meaningful. It could still be filled with love. 3 months after the court ruling, my life had begun to stabilize. I found a position at a hospital pharmacy 1 county over, a step up from retail pharmacy. Actually, my record had been expunged, my professional reputation gradually rebuilding. The financial settlement from Natalie had allowed me to rent a modest 2-bedroom house with a backyard where Emma could play during her visits. Following extensive negotiations and family court intervention, I'd secured regular visitation rights, every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. It wasn't the daily presence I'd once had in her life, but it was consistent and meaningful time together. Today was a milestone, Emma's 5th birthday. We'd planned a small celebration at my new place after her official party at Natalie's. I'd spent hours decorating, hanging streamers and balloons in Emma's favorite colors. When Natalie's car pulled in my driveway, I steeled myself for the usual tension. But to my surprise, she seemed subdued as she helped Emma out of her booster seat. She's been talking about her daddy party all day, Natalie said, avoiding eye contact. I'll pick her up at 7. Emma bounded toward me, wearing a sparkly birthday crown. Daddy, I'm 5 now. I scooped her up, twirling her around. You sure are a pumpkin. And I heard 5-year-olds get extra birthday ice cream. As we celebrated with cake and presents, I marveled at Emma's resilience. Despite the adults in her life complicating everything, she remained joyful, curious, and loving. She didn't care about DNA or court rulings. She only knew that I was her daddy, the one who built pillow forts and knew all the dinosaur names. After cake, as Emma played with her new science kit, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, my former attorney. Criminal charges officially filed against Natalie today. Thought you want to know. I set the phone aside, feelings mixed. The justice system was finally holding Natalie accountable, but her punishment would inevitably affect Emma. There are no clean victories in this mess. When 7 o'clock approached, Emma helped me clean up with a serious focus only a newly minted 5-year-old could muster. Daddy, she asked, carefully placing plastic forks in the trash. Can I ask you something important? Of course, anything. Mommy's sitting on my real daddy. She said my real daddy is Uncle Jeff. Well, you're still my daddy too, right? My heart stopped. I hadn't expected this conversation so soon, hadn't prepared what to say. I knelt to her level, choosing my words carefully. Emma, families come in all different shapes. Uncle Jeff, well, he helped make you. But being a daddy is about much more than that. It's about loving someone and taking care of them and being there when they need you. And I will always be your daddy in all those ways. She considered this with surprising seriousness, then nodded. Good, because I like having 2 daddies. More presents. I laughed, amazed at her practical wisdom. When Natalie arrived, Emma hugged me fiercely. See you Wednesday, Daddy. As I watched them drive away, I realized something profound had shifted. The past year had taken nearly everything from me. My marriage, my home, my career, my freedom, even the belief that I was Emma's biological father. Yet somehow, I kept the one thing that mattered most, my place in Emma's heart. Life wouldn't be perfect. Co-parenting with Natalie would always be complicated. But I had Emma in my life, a new career path, and finally, justice. After the darkest year of my life, I was ready to embrace this unexpected future. Not the one I'd planned, but perhaps the one I was meant to have all along.
Bye.